I'm Elena Fiddian-Qasmiyeh. I'm Professor of Migration and Refugee Studies at University College London, where I lead the Refugee Hosts project as Principal Investigator. The Refugee Host project is examining local community experiences of displacement, but also local community responses to displacement from Syria since 2011 in the context of 9 neighbourhoods in Lebanon, Jordan and Turkey. Although media and humanitarian organisations often focus on the residents of refugees in refugee camps, most refugees around the world actually live in urban or non-camp based areas, such as in villages or cities. Our research sites include a neighbourhood of Beirut, a neighbourhood of Jadash in Jordan, but also a number of refugee camps, including Badawi refugee camp in North Lebanon and also Irbid refugee camp in Jordan. These are camps which aren't isolated camps, they are part of the cities that they are situated within. Part of what our project is doing is disrupting a series of humanitarian narratives, including the assumption that refugees live in isolated camps, but also the assumption that refugees are waiting for assistance to be provided to them by citizens or by international organisations. Part of the starting point of our project is that local community members are first responders, but also that local community members often have histories of displacement themselves, which is one of the key contributions that our project is making, focusing on refugees as providers of assistance to other refugees. Our project, which is funded by the AHRC and by the ESRC, draws on a range of research methods. So we've undertaken over 500 semi-structured interviews with refugees from Syria, with members of host communities and with international NGO representatives, for example. But we've also been running a series of writing workshops in Lebanon and Jordan. We've also undertaken a series of participant observation and participatory research workshops, in addition to having a writer in residence who has been accompanying us throughout these processes. So in Badawi refugee camp, which is a camp established in the 1950s in North Lebanon, Palestinian refugees, who are the original inhabitants of this camp, have been hosting refugees from Syria since 2011. And since then, the camp has become increasingly crowded and restricted in the spaces available for people to inhabit. But at the same time, people from Syria have been creating different economies, different ways of creating meaningful livelihoods for themselves. And amongst these people are the Syrian coffee vendors, who have a particular set of equipment, as it were, to produce and to sell their coffee. And one of the most evocative sounds that I found in the camp is the traditional clinking of the coffee cups, which Syrian coffee vendors use to announce their arrival in the alleyways of the camp. So you'll be sitting indoors and you'll hear the clinking of the coffee cups and you'll know that a Syrian coffee vendor is about to pass your building, and if you would like to get a coffee you can leave. But this shows again that one can listen to displacement, one can hear the presence of different people sharing this space, beyond listening for dialects or seeing people's faces, for example. You can listen and you can see and hear who is actually sharing those spaces. There are now 5 cemeteries in Badawi camp, a camp which was established in the 1950s and which has been hosting Syrians, Palestinians, Iraqis and Kurds, who are all sharing the soil, both in life but also in death. And Abu Diab, the only gravedigger in Badawi camp, speaks of the pragmatics of dying, and I'll read his words now. He says, "I dig for the living and I dig for the dead. To live and maintain life, to keep the dignity of the dead and the solace of those who remain." This is a very powerful afternoon that we were on the roof of one of the buildings in Badawi camp, surrounded by Palestinian children who suddenly looked up in the sky and said, look at the magical writing in the sky. And what they saw was a very, very, very powerful image of migratory passage, as it were, the birds who were migrating over Badawi refugee camp. And it was not just powerful because of their emotional response to what they referred to as the magical writing in the sky, but to listen to their parents and their grandparents explaining to them the normal, historical, yearly process of migration, of how birds find the place which is safe for them, and to hear this in the context of immobility, the context of children born into a refugee camp and whose opportunities for onward migration are so severely curtailed. These children will not be able to migrate. They will remain in the camp where they have been born in most likelihood. So this juxtaposition between the magical writing in the sky and the recognition of being stuck in the place of their birth was very powerful. In addition to myself and my co-investigators leading the Refugee Hosts project, our writer-in-residence, Yusuf Mustafa-Qasmiyeh, who was himself born in Badawi refugee camp, has been accompanying us throughout our research journey. The camp is never the same, albeit with roughly the same area. New faces, new dialects, narrower alleys, newly constructed and ever-expanding thresholds and doorsteps, intertwined clothing lines and electrical cables, well-shielded balconies, little oxygen and impenetrable silences are all amassed in this space. The shibboleth has never been clearer and more poignant than it is now. Refugees ask other refugees, who are we to come to you and who are you to come to us? Nobody answers. Palestinians, Syrians, Iraqis, Kurds share the camp, the same different camp, the camp of a camp. They have all come to re-originate the beginning with their own hands and feet.